Hey, and welcome to our weekly chat known as Just Two Dads. I am Shawn Francis, and I am joined today, as usual, by my partner in Thrive, co host and friend, Brian Altunian, and our good friend, Susanna Peace Lovell, on this episode of Just Two Dads. Hey, welcome again. We want to make sure that we send a warm greeting to those of you that are looking at us, joining us live on our Facebook page, on Facebook Live, wherever you get podcasts, and those that are listening to us on WSTX AM in the U.S. Virgin Islands, on the island of St. Croix and beyond. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm good, buddy. Feeling good. I'm excited about today's topic. We're talking about mental health today, and I can't think of a better time for us to be having this conversation. So, feeling good, feeling blessed. Glad to see everybody. Glad to see Susanna and having this conversation today. So,
yes. We'll jump right into it. As you know, our friend in life and friend to the show is Susanna Peace Lovell. Welcome, Susanna.
Hi, guys. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And also, too, you both know that mental wellness and mental health is very top of mind for me in terms of my own lived experience and in terms of, how I move through the world in my life and living and with clients and so forth. So I think it's always the right time to talk
Yes,
about
it is. And for
health.
those of you that are seeing Susanna for the first time, even though this is not her first appearance here on the show, when she speaks to the topic of clients, Susanna is a life coach for special needs families. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is mental health. And there's a bunch of different directions to go in with that. But what Brian and I were talking about that made the subject come about today and why we chose it is, what is it that comes to mind when we hear the term mental health? I know that for me, it's not what it used to be. It used to be that it, at the very least, had to come with a diagnosis. And for the lack of a better word, let's just say it, once upon a time, it's not the most politically correct thing to say, but it meant someone that had an illness, mental illness. But we forget that it's mental health is part of our overall health. And right now we're in the midst of it being redefined, I think, right before our very eyes. If you look at some of the athletes who have dropped out of the competition and now in Wimbledon, some of them that are in between seasons in professional team sports that are talking about mental health. And sometimes that just means just a break from the norm. We give our muscles a break in between workouts at the gym. We give our spirits a break by the end of the day by just relaxing, so to speak. But we don't think about what that means for our mental health. I'll go eventually, but I'd like for each of you guys to share what the word, the term, and the phrase means to you now versus what it meant years ago, and how that's been affected by the rigors of being a parent to a child with special needs.
I'll just start the conversation. Mental health is not much different than physical health. Really, it kind of describes where we are. We strive for balance. We strive for good, positive health, psychically, psychologically, mentally, in our relationships. We all take vacations in order to take a break from the day-to-day routine, from activities that can be stressful, to give ourselves an opportunity to relax, to break off of social media and electronics and technology, and give ourselves a breath. And I don't think I think let me go back and say this. There's a lot of ways to access mental health. I think folks who go and get a massage, or they go through meditation, or they go to their chiropractor, or again they just take a break during the day. They step outside and go for a walk. They go to the beach. They go to their happy place. All of those things that can break from the things that can cause us stress, anxiety, tightness in our physical bodies. We've been striving for balance in our lives, and I think as we're more inundated with technology and inundated with stimulus from so many different sources, it's almost more important now to try to find ways to improve our mental health. And I get, Shawn, I get what you're saying. A lot of people think, when people talk about mental health, they are immediately go to mental illness, but mental health, keeping a good, good balance in mental health is so important. The one thing that we saw coming out of the pandemic was really a complete change in the way we do things and the way our daily schedules were. And so, to your point, we are redefining what mental health means now, and I think that priorities are adding to that, right? So people are putting our new focus on the priorities that help keep them balanced, and it's just sort of a general way to start to kick off the conversation.
Yeah. Based on your experience as a professional, your experience as a parent, and your experience prior to becoming either one of those two, Susanna, what is and has your definition of mental health evolved into?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I am so grateful that so many more people, so many more are starting to talk about mental health. And I think one of the catchphrases we hear these days are "let's break the stigma." And breaking the stigma, I think, refers to how a lot of us used to view mental health, kind of like, shame associated with it. I know for sure for me, I grew up as a very, very anxious child. And I think that because I had these little panic attacks and, anxiety would flare up at the smallest juncture, really, I was ashamed that I didn't have control over this feeling. And but I never was given any tools either in terms of how to just move through the feelings. It was just kind of like, okay, we'll deal with it. Life is stressful, move forward, kind of deal with it, like get through it. And so I grew up feeling like something was sort of wrong with me, that I couldn't just be this carefree, easygoing, happy-go-lucky. I worried about everything. I gave myself ulcers in high school while I was applying to colleges because it was so stressful for me. I'm a classically trained pianist. And so I had weekends of exhibitions and recitals and competitions, and it was so stressful, so much pressure. And so again, no release of these feelings that was shown to me, and no tools. And so I would just be sitting in these icky, yucky feelings, festering feelings without any sort of sense of release, and certainly not any sense of like, you're okay to have these. It's okay to have these feelings. Now, fast forward, obviously, as a life coach and a life coach for special needs families specifically, and a special needs mama, who, by the way, I have suffered through legit like postpartum depression of like, the pit of hell is where I have been. And so I, speak so much and teach so much with regard to self-care. And I feel like self-care for me is really about the overall wellness of being, our entire being. So physically, spiritually, mentally, all of the things, financially, having this balance is so it's non-negotiable. And so when you realize that you are not able to function as you normally could or at your sort of highest place, then it's time for a reset. And so a lot of people have different ways, different tools, different resources, different, support mechanisms for how they can take a break or take a breath. Someone might decide running 10 miles is going to do that for them. Someone might decide that they're going to sort of check out for a couple of days and not be on social media, whatever it is. It really is, the individual probably knows the best. But more importantly, there has to be a way for us to understand, identify, process through these feelings in a way that is so loving and so kind to ourselves. Yeah. Because we're all going through something. It's just a fact. And now, so even more with coming out of the pandemic, my clients, I can definitely see an uptick in terms of just feeling off balance and needing to take a breath, to reset, to recharge. We can't we can't run on empty. It's just an impossibility. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we are, honestly, I could talk about this every day, all day, and it would never be enough. And I know that someone out there somewhere will find this conversation helpful. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you said, first of all, I didn't know you were a trained concert pianist. So the onion continues to be peeled.
Yeah.
But, mental health, it's funny as you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, mental wellness. I don't know if that's a better term, but it's a thin line between the two. But if you think about it, our mental being, our mental state is challenged on a daily basis. Now, our overall health is too, by some of the stuff that we eat, which tastes great. And if we're eating it minimally, the damage is not that much because we're in control of how often we eat it and that kind of thing. For some of us, we're not in control and the damage is steady and little, but over time does a whole lot. But our mental being is challenged every single day just by, the choice to not be a hermit, to be informed, which means social media, social and otherwise, means that you're taking things in. And those things that you take in nourish your mind, feed you, uplift you, and inspire you, and all those things. But you have to pick through the menu of the things that do the opposite in order to get to that. So there's no denying that it's challenged every day. And I'm sorry, I cut you off at the beginning there, Brian. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I don't remember the point that I was going to make, but to what you're saying right now, there is no difference. There's no difference between physical health and mental health. Physical health and wellness, and mental health and wellness, from the perspective of how we process information and stimulus, whether it's food that we eat, nutrition, or things that we read, we have more success in both physical and mental well-being if we have a coach or somebody to talk to, somebody to help us. Like if you go to the gym and you have a particular goal in mind, you may not know which exercise to do to optimally put your body in the mode to improve. Same with the coach. I mean, Susanna, I know as you coach families, right? That's a great resource. A therapist, a coach, some place where folks can go to help get their mindset at least on a path. Some people listen to podcasts. Some people watch inspirational videos, and or they find somebody who's motivational. We always talk about Ed Milet and folks like Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins and Eric Thomas and Les Brown. I mean, there's so many folks out there who are continuing to put content out there that if we consume that mentally, it's like eating foods that are good for us, eating things that will nurture us. And so we spend so much time in this, in our society focused on physical health and well-being, what foods we should eat, what exercises we should be doing, what it means to be in good shape, right? And as Susanna, as you're saying, the stigma around mental health and well-being is often negative. It's often like, oh, there's a mental health issue. That person's got a mental health issue. That's as if there's something wrong. So,
like you're weak, right?
Right.
Buck up.
And it's funny. Right? There's an actress whose name I won't mention. I'm familiar with her because of social media. I don't think she's ever headlined a production. She's a fairly well-known character actress, and she happened to post about a little less than a month ago that 2 weeks prior, her son had taken his own life. And what struck me about that was the amount of time. And this is somebody that if you look at their social, she's just ridiculously upbeat and vivacious. It's hard to be down and look at her and what she does and the things that she posts and how important her family is to her. But what struck me when I saw the post was that her son was this ripped physical specimen of an individual. And we like to look at a gap or some kind of line of demarcation, between the physical and the mental, and they're separate, but at the same time not, because on one hand, again, like I said, he was just huge. You can tell looking at him, he wasn't just some big guy. He put work in to get to that point, and I would imagine he was probably happy with the way he looked, but he was unhappy enough otherwise that it caused him to take his life. And it was something that I think that they as a family dealt with over a period of time, where just trying to, make that happen. And I'm going to say something that might give some people a little bit of concern, especially some of those that are near to me. I was having a conversation with my uncle over the weekend, and I was talking about how, I've never thought of taking my own life, right? Especially when I think of the contribution you make to the planet and everything like that. You wonder, how am I going to be remembered? Or, oh my gosh, well, if I left suddenly, would everybody be okay? How would I be remembered? That's the closest I've ever come to it. And that's just a matter of practical thinking. That's not depression. But I will say this: I have a clear understanding, as clear as one can have, without having those thoughts or desires, as to why certain people would give up. And what I mean by that is that if I didn't have who I have around me, if I didn't have who I had around me growing up to have what I have within me, I don't know how different I might be in terms of dealing with certain situations, and things of that nature. And what I mean is, like, when we talk about our mental health and our well-being, some of us need to just unplug for a little bit. Maybe we escape into a TV show or a movie or something that is just happy. We get into our thoughts, and we need to get away from reality in order to get back into it and face it. Sometimes some of us will face it with some kind of meditation or something of that sort. And I have an understanding. I think I can see where a person whose constitution is not that strong might need to permanently get away from that. And I think that's a point I never thought that I could get to. And understand me when I say I have no thoughts whatsoever about, ending my own journey. But I have what I think is an understanding as to why somebody else might do that. And that might be just based on, it hit me, I think, on certain days where I feel like, you know what? I don't know if I feel like doing anything today. I just feel like I'm staying in the bed. And that's when you feel like it's quote unquote like lazy or whatever. And every now and then you find something hits you and you're like, I just got to get out of this rut. Like for me, there was a post I saw today of some guy, there are people that are doing posts where they take a clothing item and they throw it at the camera. And as soon as it covers the camera, they edit it so that once the item is removed, there's a jump edit where they're doing something else. There was a guy that was older, long, silvery beard, but just jacked, ripped, and buff. And he took a thing and a scarf or something, threw it at the camera, and it jump edits 3 different times that he's like in phenomenal shape and wearing these sharp clothes and everything. And for me, I was in a little bit of a rut and I was feeling a little bit tired, didn't sleep the best last night. I saw that and I was ready to go. Some people, that's not enough for them. They need a formal session with a therapist. Some people turn to a bottle. Some people turn to a needle. And what we need to do is be, as we often say, more childlike and less childish. Ask more questions and try to figure out how to get in that person's shoes and like, what is it exactly that makes them feel that way? Because the more understanding that we have towards each other and the more empathy we have, we give ourselves a better chance of being in a better place.
Have you, Shawn, have you ever experienced depression in your life? Do you think?
I think one time in my life, I think that might be, what it was. I had a breakup, pushing more than like 20 years ago, something like that. And I realized through working through it myself that the person was somebody I shouldn't have been with, like, to begin with. And when I say that, I just mean like, oh, they're an awful person. You just wouldn't expect us to be together. And I think that most people have someone that they've had a relationship, whether their relationship lasted a night, weeks, or months, that they just should not have necessarily been with. And I think that when people do that, and I'm not a professional, but I think that is usually a reflection of how big a hole a person has within them. And their attempt to fill that hole is either done with the wrong person, the wrong substance, or the wrong activities, or all of the above. And I just had one instance where a person and I were just like night and day. And when the relationship ended, I felt like it was just this most horrible thing, so crushed and everything. And at the time, I thought it was because that relationship ended with that person. Well, what I was really crushed by was the relationship that wasn't existent to begin with, and it was a relationship with myself.
Yeah.
So I think that's the closest I think I've ever come to having a situation like that.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked you that question, Shawn, is because prior to my sort of clinical diagnosis of postpartum depression, I had never been quote depressed in my entire life. However, looking back at various situations and challenges and issues where I just felt like very blue for periods of time in response to various circumstances, but I was always able to sort of like get through, move through, work through on my own, sort of like to get to the other side. But once I was postpartum, the hormones and the imbalance of chemicals like just took over. And so all of the tools and resources and support that I had relied upon to, be functional up until that point were no longer working because I was so off balance. Add in the fact that I now had a newborn to take care of who was, crying and fussy around the clock. And, my anxiety, which is already here on a good day. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't even want to use the word good because it's not good or bad, better or worse. I just want to say on a normal day for me, Susanna P. Lovell, my levels are here. And so now add in taking care of a newborn. And I was like, I will never be able to take care of myself again. I literally went through, it was a multiple year journey of imbalance and trying to understand how I was going to get through this period. I mean, really, really, really. And if we want to talk about suicidal ideations, I kind of got close to thinking for sure, I just don't want to be here. I don't want to be here, and I didn't go so far to think about, what that could look like and what I would do and so on and so forth. But it really, everything else in terms of like all of the people who love me and surround me and family and friends, I didn't care anymore at that point, so those things weren't grounding enough for me in those moments. And sometimes I think we have to realize, because again, you look at me maybe and you think, okay, that lady kind of has it together a little bit, and she has an amazing network and people around her. But sometimes it just is not up to us in terms of these feelings that take over. And so I want us to also have the empathy for that. And even to the point now where I'm so grateful that I went through these experiences, because I am able to speak to them, identify with clients on different levels. And then, whenever I'm in a situation now where someone is like really rude on the road or, not nice at the grocery store, whatever it is, I always just immediately think to myself, love and compassion to them. There is something going on with them. Yeah. Other times I snap, you know what I mean? And have some words, but but I often now will just be like, I wonder what's going on in their life.
And that goes, that's exactly what I'm talking about the questions. And I'm saying we need to ask more questions than make more statements. Questions are more powerful than statements. And I might sound like Captain Zen, but I'm not telling you that because I have it mastered. I'm telling you that because, I struggle with it, because there's days when that takes place. Yesterday at a fast food restaurant at the drive-thru, there was somebody that just would not let me out, and we had like an exchange back and forth, but it was very calm. It was civil, but I still found myself walking away from it going, how could I have made that like even better? Because then the other thing, and this is a whole different direction to go in, which is the example that we give our kids when we have less control, of that. Sometimes it's funny and it's cute, but for some people it's different. The bottom line is everybody's got cracks. Everybody's got holes, some bigger than others, and everybody's cause is a little different too.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think, when we end this show, I always say, empathy and love is, always always needed. And, we have no idea what's happening in the world of the people around us, except for our daily, in fact, our direct interaction with them. And it doesn't really matter how they appear, and it doesn't really matter if they have, a support system. To your point, Susanna, I think when you're in it, it's a singularly lonely and alone place to be. Doesn't, when I was younger, I used to, hear people talk about depression. I was like, do something that makes you happy, or, find something that makes you, that will snap you out of it. And the reality is, I think when you go through depression, there really is nothing that can do that. There really is nothing that you can't go, oh, well, then let me go turn on a comedy, or, let me go to a comedy store or something like that. You can't be pulled out of it. You have to go through the process. You can talk through it. But I definitely have experienced, both severe depression and suicidal thoughts. And there was a period of time when I actually thought, walking down the street, close to, walking on a sidewalk close to the street, like, man, it could just make it look like I've just fell into traffic by accident, right? Not thinking about the implications of what that would mean for my family or for my children, or frankly, thinking about anybody else. Not thinking about what it was that got me there, or what it was going to take to get me out of it. I don't really know. I would say that it's one of those things. It's like it can be like a cloud that, while it may blow away temporarily, there are remnants of the clouds that always remain. And, I think once you go through depression, it's not the same as alcoholism. So I don't mean to make the connection, but, when people go into recovery from drugs and alcohol, they consider themselves always an addict, right? Because they're always one step away from slipping back into, to an addiction. And I think depression is very similar to that. I think once you've had depression, I think that the tendency to have anxiety and depression, and that is always there in the back of our minds. Tony Robbins used to always, I think there's so many videos of Tony Robbins talking about Robin Williams, where, he asks his audiences, how many people loved Robin Williams, not liked Robin Williams, but loved Robin Williams, and right. He said, and people raised their hand, and he was like, seriously, put your hand down if you just thought he was funny, or if you enjoyed his comedy, but if you truly loved Robin Williams. People raise their hand. He said, I travel all over the world, and I ask that question, and there are people all over the world who claim that they love Robin Williams. The outpouring of love for Robin Williams wasn't fulfilling enough for Robin Williams to not, take his own life. And while we could never really know all of the pieces that went into, his decision to do what he did, the reality is, fulfillment, in a sense of fulfillment, it's so personal, and it's so, it's so specific that, again, we don't know what goes through the minds of other people. So, Susanna, to your point, when people are going through their stuff, I always think, we have no idea. Bullies who, when I tell my kids, you don't know what a bully is going through at home. You don't know what they're dealing with. They come to a schoolyard and they act a certain way. You have no idea what's happening. You see, the way that people are in relationships out in public. You have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And we're so anxious to rush to judgment about people. We've saw that with this election process in the last year, and we've seen this with this divisiveness in this country. And I know that this is really a universal, and we're seeing it's a universal concern that, the polarization of positioning what we're doing. We really don't have any clue what's happening in somebody else's home or their heads. Right.
That's funny because that brings me to two impressions that I'm getting. One is that, and I've kind of known already, I guess, that there are more of us that are closer to harming ourselves than we probably realize.
Yeah.
But listening to the conversation here with you guys, what you just did is just completely solidified for me as like, aha, you know what? I know for a fact that there are more than we think, and we pass them more often than we think, and we don't necessarily know how close people are. And we have to not only have, I don't like the term tolerance because I think that it equates to putting up with something, like dealing with an annoyance. I think it's more appropriate to say that we should just keep our level of consciousness as it relates to ourselves, but more importantly, as it relates to others, at a constant high, and allow ourselves to grow and allow ourselves to be wrong. Because, for instance, on social media, I belong to a lot of special needs groups, parents groups. And over the years, my reaction has gone from, in certain instances, to, ooh, I got no idea what that's like, to actually at some point, for lack of a better term, maybe even judging people in some instances, going, why would you do that? And then asking the same question, going, wait a minute, why would they do that? Because you don't know what each person's situation is, what their predisposition is to depression to begin with, in addition to dealing with what they're dealing with their child. So if we're talking about how these things affect just families that are not members of the special needs community, right? In our community, that has to be upped considerably. I've never seen any statistic that talks about what the level of depression or anxiety is like amongst families that have members of special needs or people that care for those with special needs. But that has to be super high. And it just makes me think again about what we're trying to do with our movement with regard to both this show and the financial education service and opportunity portion of it as well, because none of those things are the answers to it all. But each one of these things, the show, the movement in terms of uniting people and everything, as well as the service opportunity and education, are all pieces of it. And I think we just need to continue to push as we grow and try and offer as many resources to people, because as we're saying this, I feel like there's a little piece of the onion with each of you that not that I didn't know was there, but is there, but I kind of knew but didn't know. And then at the same time has me thinking about the overall onion of life, so to speak, which goes back to the notion that there are more people out there that are closer to that than we think. They might not necessarily be on a ledge, but, and I'm the one who ends the show by saying people need to know that they're seen, that they're heard, that they love. They need to know that they matter. They need to know that someone knew that they were here. And those aren't just words. I mean, I just kind of ran through that, but the bottom line is people really need to know those things. And most people, 9.5 out of 10 probably, are not going to tell you, excuse me, I need to be heard. I need to know that I matter. Most people aren't going to do that. So if people aren't going to speak to let it be known that their desire is so great to be heard, so innate and so important, if the mouth is not going to be that loud, then our listening needs to be loud, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Susanna, yeah, you were going to say something there.
Yeah, I mean, I always have so much to say, but what I was thinking about when you were talking just now, Shawn, is that, listen, the struggle is real. And we say, check on your strong friends for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Check on your strong friends. Check on all your people, of course, but also, and
the ones under your roof.
check on your strong friends. And listen, again, I'm so grateful that these conversations are, being publicized, Harry and Meghan, and their sit down with Oprah. And it's so challenging. And listen, all these, professional athletes, Kevin Love has the Kevin Love Fund, and, had a very sort of real issue with anxiety and panic attacks, like on the court. a couple of years back, and so has dedicated a lot of his work and living around breaking the stigma around mental health. So, but we have these individuals that we would think, oh my gosh, poor you with your, huge multi-million dollar contract and your, amazing life and homes and private jets and so on. I've heard people talk about Megan, and saying like, oh, poor her.
Yeah.
Must be so awful living in a $12 million house in Montecito. And so, and that's when I just jump in and need to advocate, even in these little sort of petty conversations that I'm hearing. It's just like, you don't know.
Yeah.
There is no discrimination when it comes to mental health matters. I mean, it doesn't matter if you are, the things that people find that you might define as successful in your own life, are not necessarily what is going to be the driver for other people. Anyhow, so all I'm saying is there is no lesser than situation where someone is struggling. And I think anytime someone is crying for help, we respond, and we respond immediately.
I would even venture to say that it's probably a little more of a challenging situation, more insidious to be financially or quote unquote socially set and have issues of a lack of fulfillment or unhappiness, because that has to be like having a carrot in front of you, because you're surrounded by that which should make you happy. And especially if it's not material, not just material, but you got family and all that, everything that is the picture of a great and full and fulfilled life, yet you don't feel fulfilled. One has to be twice as likely to ask the question, what is wrong with me, if that ends up being the case. And the bottom line is, again, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I think that's because we place a lot of emphasis on, material wealth and material, collections and, the things that we think should make us happy. That is, part of the problem, frankly. It's like, based on what and who says so, and who determines what other people's happiness should be. But I did a lot of work with startup companies and CEOs and I used to follow a lot of hedge fund and venture capital individuals, people who would fund these startup companies, and I read an in-depth blog. There was a venture capitalist, and he had kept a blog about his searing, almost debilitating depression, and the fact that it made it okay for CEOs and startup founders to come forth and talk about the mental health stress and pressures, and the mental health concerns that they had. And again, as Susanna, as you're saying, like, when you've got somebody like Kevin Love or Naomi Osaka or Aaron Rodgers that we've been talking about, somebody who's in a high profile position, or Megan and Harry, somebody in a high profile position who's struggling, that gives people the opportunity to sort of separate that material wealth and fitness, if you will, from mental health and fitness, and gets people to say, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in all of this. And it helps to eliminate the stigma. And I think that's why these conversations are so good. And special needs families, as we've talked about a lot on this podcast, especially dads, we take this sort of position. Well, fathers are supposed to be, a certain way, and mothers are supposed to be a certain way as it comes to dealing with our children who struggle with special needs and medically complex issues. And the reality is that a lot of men would rather, because of a stigma, not talk about it and not bring it to the forefront, and not, there are more mom support groups than dad support groups. I love the fact that We Are Brave Together is talking about doing now, dad support groups and more dad nights, and, men getting into this conversation and working on eroding the stigma that comes along with this, because we all struggle, and it doesn't really matter where we come from, what we were raised with, what our family, what our culture is. We all struggle with some form of you know, I don't want to say we've some form of mental health issues, but mental health is an area of concern on many levels, regardless of where we come from or where we're going.
I think many of us are continually struggling to find balance.
Yeah.
In the realm of mental health.
And I'm not sure what the balance is, right? I mean, right? I don't think anybody's, and I think that's like the ultimate sort of guru thing is like, what's the balance? And I think that's an individual thing too, right?
For sure.
What's balance for you, Susanna, is different than balance for me and different than balance for Shawn, right? So we all like want to find the magic formula, right? The magic diet pill. There's magic secret to
the
wealth.
Magic bullet, right?
The magic bullet. What is the one thing?
Yeah.
And I think if everybody gets that, it's not one thing, and it may be one thing for you, but it's not one thing that's universal.
It might be one thing for you in one moment.
In one moment,
right?
Sure.
So it's just
For sure.
I think it's kind of, we have to start with sort of awareness of our own selves and understanding, and then acceptance of who we are and our feelings. I mean, listen, I mean, it just, any circumstance can just throw our day to pit,
For sure.
And or feelings and or hormones and or whatever else, or what we ate today. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing this little sort of juicing detox. I had surgery a couple of months ago, and I was just kind of like resetting from all the like anesthesia and drugs they pump into your body during surgery. Either way, anyway, I was doing this juicing. Why are you laughing, Brian? I don't understand what's so funny.
No. I'm not.
So
Brian. That's not funny, Brian.
You did something new, and go ahead.
I'm sharing my feelings.
I'm sorry.
But my point is, and so then we're told though, and I to focus on my physical, like everything we put into our body, what we surround ourselves energetically, right? We're going to take that on and sort of move through our life with whatever it is that we are ingesting. And so, but my point is like, I'm going through this detox, and then I'm thinking, I really should be like 100% plant-based. And, that's what everyone says is the healthiest way for living, and so on and so forth. And so I was doing that. And I will tell you that I literally, and listen, I love a vegan lifestyle. I love a plant-based lifestyle. It is not what works for me, meaning I just was like, literally like, I didn't have any energy. I wasn't feeling good. And I was not feeling my best. And so I realized like, we try to do some things that we think are the one size fits all for, sort of the movement of the time or whatever it may be. But really just sort of tuning in and tapping into what our needs are in each moment, I think is really, really an important tool and skill set for us to have, and what we need to, carry forward with us in life. And so anyway, so all I'm saying is that we just need to listen to ourselves and really ask ourselves, like, what is it that I need today in this moment to help me sort of feel at my best? And we know, I think sometimes more often than not, we have the answer, within us. We just have to, don't you think?
And
that's the value of silence, sitting in silence. I say that most of the things that we're looking for, sometimes we really need counsel elsewhere and that kind of thing. But that goes back to what I refer to as raising our level of consciousness. So, sitting in silence long enough to allow the answer to either come to you or step out from the shadows and reveal itself because it was there all along. That's true more often than not, but there are times when we really have to bounce something off somebody. And I remember there's times I've told Brian, I may call him, and this is either me being hard-headed or my consciousness being high. I don't know which one, but I'm calling, having a conversation, and there's a short list of people that this happens with me, where I'm asking a question, and the idea of asking it out loud to someone other than myself causes me to, I'm asking the question, and they'll begin, you know what, wait a minute, I know, yada, yada, yada. And there's the answer. And then I'll tell them, they say that greatness is letting people know what they knew all along. Man, you're fantastic. Thanks a lot. And I don't know if the person feels like, okay, yes, I am great. Or you knew all along. You're right. Most of the time, more times than not, we know.
I was also going to say, we're so used to asking people, hey, how you doing today? And then people are like, you know, I'm good, right? Or no, you know, we just like an easy answer, you know,
right.
or
Yeah.
same old, or
Yeah.
same day, same shit, different day, whatever people say, right? Like
Yeah.
it's such a like, it doesn't matter. Like it's a throwaway answer to a throwaway question, which is funny because the opposite is like, no, so really, how are you? Like nobody wants that either. There's gotta be like, there should be a balance, you know.
Well, then there's the people that you ask them, well, how's it going? Well, you know, to begin with, I stubbed my toe and then my cat threw up and woo, that was a doozy. And, you know, so it goes both ways. Yeah.
No, for sure. And I think that
those are very valid reasons, Shawn.
Right? Stubbing a toe, right? It could
seriously.
You know.
Hello. Yes. Stepping on a Lego piece.
Oh my God.
Oh, those are sharp.
Worst. But it does go to the point that I think that we ask the question not really wanting to hear the answer, or not wanting to hear anything other than I'm okay, or things are great, or you know, things are good. Yeah, how often are we surprised when you say to somebody, you know, hey, how you doing? Like, oh man, I'm having the greatest freaking day. I got to tell you, right? Because then it's such a rare thing. They'll be like, oh, well, what's going on? Like, well, that's cool. Like, we want to hear that stuff. But if saying, oh my God, I'm done today. I'm out. Like, some people, they don't want to hear that question. They don't want to hear that answer, right? We want to hear the good stuff. We don't want to hear the bad stuff, right? But it shows that because we're dealing with our own, and it's almost like we can't take on anybody else's stuff, right? Which shows, to your point, Shawn, how prevalent the issue is. People are struggling with things on multiple levels on a daily basis.
You just made me think about something, Brian, because it's so interesting, though, because we don't necessarily want to hear about the bad things, although I feel like sometimes we kind of do, because then we're like, okay, good, I'm not the only one who's feeling lousy today. And then also, too, think about it, though. We get so much more attention when we talk about, you know, sort of like the bad day and the walking 10 miles to school in the snow and the, you know, woe is me, right?
Ways. Yeah.
Uphill both ways. And so when someone asks you and you're just like, I'm having a really horrible day, it's so challenging, people are like, oh my gosh, I know. And so much sympathy, right? And then they're or they're like, how are you doing today? I'm great. And then the conversation moves on, right? Yeah. So there is this idea that, you know, sacrifice and struggle is so rewarded, I want to say sometimes, you know, in the parenting world, and specifically the three of us being special needs parents, you know, we are often, you know, talking to other parents about, you know, some of our challenges and struggles, and it can get to a place where we're like participating in the hardship Olympics sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and not because we're trying to one up, but we're, you know, although maybe, I don't know, there, you know, it's sort of an interesting, sort of an interesting thing. So just something to note. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're struggling with that, but you don't know what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with something, you know, something different.
There's a line in a Bob Marley song that says, and I'm paraphrasing, but every man believes his burden is the heaviest, you know, which is like, you know, and sometimes we're so innate with that we don't even know. Like, really? Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you, blah, 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 blah. And what the person is really looking for is for somebody to listen, you know?
Yeah. Listen, how many of us know that, you know, in our high school years, right? And which is basically totally hormonally driven, right? Good and bad. That during high school, everything is the worst thing ever. Or, oh my God, I just broke up, I'm going to die. Like, it's everything is an extreme situation in high school. It's we've, like, our hormones have taken over, like we've got aliens inside that are, right? And in a way, we haven't really...
And we all have teenagers. We all have teenagers right now. We all have
teenagers, so we've lived it ourselves, and now we see it. We haven't evolved much from that.
You're absolutely right.
Social media is another extension of it all, right? So people put on Facebook their complaints, their issues, their worries for attention, for support, for sympathy. People put on their best, you know, living their best life for acknowledgement and, you know, a pat on the back and attention, right? So we have, like, social media has become an extension of our high school experience, where we just want to be, Shawn, as you say, we just want to be seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just want to know that our life matters. And whether it's good attention or bad attention, or attention for something we're doing good, or attention for something that we need support in, you know,
it used to be,
it used
to be that we traded in the sandbox on the playground for the water cooler in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
But now that's almost gone by the wayside, and we've gone straight from the sandbox to social media, because at least with the water cooler, that's 9 to 5, right? But social media is like 9 to 9, 24/7, 365. So everything is look at me, look at me.
And it's worse. And it's worse. And this is a whole nother topic. It's worse because people can respond anonymously.
Oh yeah, we talked about that earlier today. Yeah. That's people. I'm glad you said that, because that I wanted to touch on that too. When we talk about trying to uplift people here, and not in a kumbaya, hold my hand around the campfire with marshmallows type of way, but in an effective way. And you know, there's sports is the greatest metaphor for that. It takes something special to stand out and attempt to do something great. But because of social media, we're in an era right now where we will applaud those that do great things. And even those that do the greatest of things are not immune from the criticism of those that, you know, don't leave a couch and still have their hand in a bag of chips. And I think that's sort of pathetic. And I think that even certain members of the media perpetuate that. For instance, you take a young guy, 20, 21 years old. He's now in the NBA. All the lights are on him. I'm trying not to mention any names here, but you know, it's one thing if he doesn't have the work ethic of a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan or something like that. Those things are exceptional, even exceptional to one's talent. And if a person is not doing that, and they want to kind of, you know, somebody pull a person aside and say, hey, you know, here's what you need to work on. But my gosh, this day and age that we live in, you know, last night was game 1 of the NBA finals. I haven't looked at a bunch of responses and things like that, but there's people that have opinions that they will die for and kill for about how someone performed and what they did and didn't do, you know, right or wrong. This is the only era. I shouldn't say the only era. This is an era more than any other where someone has never even failed in an attempt to do something great, but is fully secure in their ability and their right to judge someone else who's making an attempt to do that, and has achieved a certain amount of greatness, which is why you know about them anyway. So there's just a lot of critics, and people need to kind of come off of their high horse and, you know, look at each other in a little different way.
Be about anybody famous. You know, we see it on apps like TikTok and Snapchat
high school
and Instagram, where an average person is just sharing something, and there's a barrage of attacks from anonymous people who use a misnomer, right, a different name, so you don't even know who the hell it is that's responding. And this is cyberbullying now at an adult level, where there used to be bullying in school and bullying in high school, and this cyberbully attacks, whether it's a CEO of a company, an athlete, or just a mom who's taking care of her kids and wants to have some fun by doing a dance on a social media app. This goes again. We're not caring and taking enough care for those other inhabitants of this planet, and putting ourselves in those positions. There's so many people who are attacking, you know, folks who are supporting a vaccination for COVID, or wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And then, you know, you often hear like, well, geez, I was on the wrong side of that conversation, and now look at my situation. So like, now I got, you know, I got some perspective. I'm on the other side now. Maybe I was against the vaccination, and now I got sick, and now I've got perspective. And, you know, I always say, when we talk about things like, you know, like death and illness, like, don't wait for a tragedy or for you to be on the other side to get the perspective that somebody else may be going through something, or may have a reason for what they're doing, or, we need to take so much more care in our own mental health and in the mental health of those around us. So, just to make this a more livable place to be. Otherwise, we're really heading down a terrible rabbit hole, and
do you see this vicious cycle, right? So it's like we're coming full circle here. So someone's being bullied, but they're being bullied by somebody who is hurt, right?
A bully is always bullied. Yeah.
We just know that hurt people hurt people. And so what are we doing? So we're continuing this cycle instead of intervening, breaking it, and doing something new and different.
And so this, as we're getting close to the end of our hour, being able to have this conversation on this platform, and for anybody who's listening on any of the podcasts, outlets, or seeing us on our YouTube channel, I'm hoping that this is the beginning of multiple conversations around this. And we always talk about empathy and love and thinking about the fact that people want to be seen and heard and living a fulfilled life. And especially for those families that deal with special needs issues, some of this becomes even more pronounced because the focus is so much more, on what's right immediately in front of us. And so hopefully we get to have more of these conversations. Obviously it's this, and I will tell you guys, just having this conversation with the two of you, I find to be, incredibly filling, if that's the proper word. I feel like these are good conversations to be having. And honestly, Susanna, Shawn and I used to have these kinds of conversations, just the two of us on a phone, because we were tied into each other's mental health, I think, well enough to know where each other stands. And so that's what's the impetus of this entire podcast to begin with Shawn and I having these conversations and creating empathy and awareness and wanting people to have this conversation. So thank you for being a part of this conversation today. And as a coach, I'm sure that you see a wide variety of these. And I would encourage, families who are dealing with special needs issues to seek out, reach out to Susanna for support. And, and if it's not Susanna, somebody who can be a support for you and make sure that you feel heard and seen and gotten, and that you get a chance to find out what your balance is. And I would say, empathy and love, important more now than almost any other time in our world. So on that, I know we're getting close to signing off, but Susanna, as always, you and I have many of these same kinds of conversations. And so I get the benefit from being able to talk to both of you on a regular basis, one-on-one. And so I love that we get to share this space with our, people who are in our community that continues to expand and grow. And to let everybody know, and I'm not trying to steal the end here, but the three of us are working on a 2-day event here for in September, where we're going to have opportunity for people to get access to a bunch of service providers in this particular space, and hopefully we'll be able to be an ongoing resource for people who are looking for some balance in their lives. So thank you, Susanna, for your continued partnership and everything that we're doing. And Shawn Francis, I love you and thank you for always for our partnership.
Most definitely. Love you right back. And I am filled with gratitude beyond measure for this platform and this opportunity. Make sure that we put Susanna's information in the chat for those that are actually looking, whether it's on Facebook Live or you're going to be looking later on our YouTube page. Again, to those listening to us in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thank you so very much. Those that are listening wherever you find your podcast, thank you. Make sure that you go to our YouTube page, like it, and share it. We are really just getting started with our attempt to add as much value to, quite frankly, not just the special needs community, but the planet as much as we humanly possibly can. And I want to make sure, again, that I thank the two most immediate women in my life, without whom I could not begin to attempt to be who I hope to be, and I am. And that is my mom, Jan, and my wife, Laura. And just remember, again, now more than ever, people need to know that they matter. People need to know that they're heard, and that they're seen, and they need to know once they've gone that somebody knows that they were here. We control that based on what we do with our lives here. And as the great Muhammad Ali used to say, service to others is the rent that we pay for our room here on earth. So if you
Sean,
will be so kind as to tune in with us next week. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was say, don't forget Sean Hall in Hawaii, who always supports everything that we do here. Thank you, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
And my daughter Jo,
Most definitely
who
completely
always
shapes
contributes.
the show and everything that we look at. Thank you for tuning in, Joe.
Joe
and
Robert,
again,
who respond, to constantly comment. Susanna, do you anything you want to say to people?
Listen, I am so blessed. I'm so blessed to be in partnership with you two in this life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. We'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, everybody. See you again soon.